the way they are and how they came to be at this point in time. And I did go back and I did look at some of the ancient drawings, and I did notice that Venus itself is actually a newer planet. And I just wanted you just to touch on that, because I know they had talked to you about some things. They had schooled you and told you about things that were going on and so forth and so on.
Yes, yes. Well, originally the configuration of our solar system was very different than what we have now. In the beginning, yes, Mercury was the first planet, that always has been. Then there was the Earth. Earth was actually in the second position from the sun, and it was generally a water planet. It was covered, almost 100% with water. Even the atmosphere was very liquid in nature, and it was a hot, humid environment. Then came the planet Mars, which was very Earth-like in those days, and even had an atmosphere like we have now, and oceans and seasons. It was very much like we experience here now. Then after that came a larger planet that was we call now Maldek, which was very large, also had an atmosphere and oceans, and was very inhabitable. Then we had Jupiter, what we see now, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And that was basically it. Now, going way, way back in history, and I'll try to make it very short, the origin of all human life in our galaxy was in a star system called Lyra, and the Draco star system had a reptilian civilization, which it still does. And to make a long story short, the Draco attacked the Lyrian civilization, basically destroyed it, sent the survivors spreading out across the known galaxy, even to our current solar system. The only planets that were colonizable here was Mars and Maldek. And so the reptilians had an agenda of spreading out across the galaxy to destroy and or assimilate other civilizations to make them reptilianized. They discovered the colonizations of humans on Mars and Maldek, and they sent into our solar system an ice comet that was designed to destroy those colonies. When the ice comet came close to Uranus, Uranus flipped on its axis and is the only known world that actually orbits from a north to south instead of west to east orbit. And that's because of the disturbance from the ice comet. As it approached Maldek, the geomagnetic forces between the ice comet, Maldek, Jupiter, and the sun was so great that Maldek exploded, creating what we now have as the asteroid belt between Jupiter and Mars. As it got closer to Mars, the force, the gravitational pull, removed much of the atmosphere and oceans of Mars, leaving it to what we know now. And finally, as it approached the Earth, the force, actually the weakened force of the ice comet and the Earth caused the two objects to go into a circular spin around one another, polarizing the oceans on the Earth so that they created polar ice caps and actually pulled the water off the planet, off the atmosphere, so that land masses were enabled to go above the surface. And ultimately, the ice comet took up the second position around the sun, pushing the Earth into the third position where we are today. And the ice comet then became what we now know as the planet Venus. But because the ice comet was now in an orbit so close to the sun and so hot, it caused the ice to evaporate and create what we now know as the cloud cover around Venus, which we see to this very day. And that's how our solar system was configured. You know, Pluto was only discovered in 1930, and that's because it didn't exist there until then. It is an artificial object that is there as an outpost, as an observation for the rest of the solar system. The Earth, though, at that time now became colonizable because it had land masses above, and so the reptilians drove a vehicle into orbit around our planet to colonize it. We call that vehicle the Moon. The Moon, as some of your listeners may know, is the only known object in space that only goes around the Earth as a moon and does not spin. Only one side faces the Earth at all times. It does not spin.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's I always wondered about that. Like, I've always wondered why it didn't do that. Why doesn't it do that?
And that's because it is a vehicle that's parked in orbit. It doesn't spin. It's just parked in orbit like a vehicle, and that's why only one side faces at all times. And if you send a sonic resonance off of the moon, like the Russians did in the 1960s, the moon pings like a hollow object